So, once upon a time, Loki was one of the darlings of Warframe. Everybody was after him, and I mean a very long time ago, like back when void keys were still a thing. And since then, Loki has remained mostly untouched. Seen a few additional augments released over time. There haven't really been any tweaks to his abilities, and he's mostly just been left the same as he was 8, 9, 10 years ago at this point. So you might be thinking then that since Loki is kind of a dated Warframe, he probably needs a lot of love to really make him more viable in today's day and age of Warframe. And I do think that he could use a few tweaks here and there, but I'm going to show you here that by swapping out an ability and picking some specific mods, Loki is an absolute menace. There was one particular change that was made, I'm not exactly sure when, that was made not just to Loki, but to invisibility generally, where any invisibility will not have enemies fire at you if you are using loud weapons. In the past, you could go invisible, but if you were using any firearm, just anything that was making lots of noise that wasn't listed as silent, enemies would still shoot in the direction of where they heard the gunfire from, which frankly makes sense, but they also decided to just get rid of that at some point. So that alone is something that is really nice because although Loki does have an augment for his invisibility that makes all of your weapons silent, it takes the mod slot on the Warframe, and who wants to do that? So instead, now we can just throw on whatever mods we want to make Loki really, really damn good. We could use invisibility to have enemies just completely ignore us. We can use switch teleport with the augment to make ourselves and allies invincible. And we're going to swap out his fourth ability for pillage to get rid of everybody's armor and shields. Now, I know some people are going to think that it's crazy to get rid of radial disarm on Loki, but let's be real here. If enemies are already not attacking you while you're invisible, then what the hell is the point of disarming them? And if you can make yourself invincible using the safeguard switch augment, what's the point of disarming them? The main reason that we're putting pillage over Loki's 4 instead of his 1 is because we're utilizing precision intensify. We need a lot of power strength to get pillage up to a complete 100% armor strip. If you put it on 1, you can't utilize precision intensified to buff it up. Not that his decoy is really useful at all either. Even the augments that it has now that have been added more recently still aren't that useful. So both his 1 and his 4 really are not all that useful. We're just going to replace radial disarm with pillage so we can use precision intensify. The shards that I have thrown on here are duration instead of power strength because we're using 3 specific power strength mods, so dropping any one of them and trying to fill in that space with shards is possible, but I wouldn't recommend it. The thing is that buffing up your duration is going to increase the duration you get for safeguard switch, which is really nice for helping to keep Loki alive. So I've opted to put on 4 ability duration shards here. I also have a Tau Forge parkour velocity just because that's what I like. Loki can go fast when you use his switch teleport. And when you have Warframes moving really fast, if you have lower or just normal parkour velocity, it tends to make your bullet jumps feel kind of slow, actually. So this just feels a lot nicer for helping his movement feel more fluid when he's going fast. If you don't care about that, then I think the most optimal thing to do here would be to just use 5 duration shards. And it's also worth noting these are not at all necessary to have on here. These are nice. Having more duration on your safeguard switch is very nice, but it's not necessary. Duration is also very useful for pillage because the amount of area that pillage covers is affected by both range and duration. Duration affecting how long it's active, so that pulse keeps expanding out further and further the more duration you have, and then range affects how much it expands per second. So you don't actually have to have high range in order to take advantage of pillage as long as you can have super high duration. So now let's actually look at what we have going on with this whole setup. We are using corrosive projection. That way we do not have to hit 400% power strength on pillage. If you haven't messed around with pillage before on other Warframes, well, even on Hildred actually, but it ends up being used on other Warframes a decent amount if you want good armor stripping. The number that you need to hit if you're going to use corrosive projection is 328% power strength. The base amount of defense reduction that Pillage has is 25% at 100% power strength. That means you need 400% power strength to get 100% defense reduction. Corrosive projection, removing 18% armor at base, means that we only need to have 328% power strength total. So, transient fortitude, blind rage, and precision intensify takes care of our power strength for Pillage. It also gives us a pretty nice amount of power strength going into switch teleport, which normally isn't something that we would care about on Loki at all. Pretty much every old build for Loki focusing on invisibility and radial disarm is just pure duration and range. But we don't need range since there is no range cap. Well, there is a range cap on teleport, but it honestly doesn't matter. You're going to be running around all over the place anyways. And 25 meters is still plenty of range to teleport with people. The power strength affects the speed bonus that you get from switch teleport, which was a small change made at some point, giving you an actual reason to use switch teleport even if you're not using safeguard switch. But we are, so we're getting two different benefits from it. Duration benefiting safeguard switch, and power strength benefiting the speed bonus that we get. Otherwise, obviously, duration is just going to bump up invisibility more and more. You still can't refresh this while it's active, but whatever. It's not that big of a deal. And having basically 32 seconds of invisibility is very nice. Since we're running negative power strength with blind rage, and I didn't feel like losing more power duration with fleeting expertise to make it more balanced out, I'm just going to go with Arcane Energize. A bit of a cop-out choice, but we're not using Neuroshan here, so this just makes it easier to keep everything active. And you're going to be using your abilities a fair amount, so you definitely want to have a decent amount of energy economy going here. And to that end, although you will see here, I do have 2 Vigilante mods installed, since Loki is essentially just being turned into a weapons platform Warframe. If you want more energy, if you want a better energy economy, then I would suggest swapping out the Vigilante mods and then throwing on an Equilibrium mod instead. That's going to help out a lot with your energy sustain. You're going to have to change the polarities on here, but I did add an additional Vazarin polarity to fit in some different things that I was trying out, and Vigilante Vigor just happened to fit in that spot. If I wasn't going to use those mods, definitely would polarize for something else. If you want a really comfy energy economy, go with Equilibrium. The nice thing about this whole setup is that once you have all the power, strength, and duration that you want, and you have Safeguard Switch in there, you don't really need anything else. Most of our duration is coming from Narrow-Minded and Primed Continuity, plus we have the additional 40% from those Archon Shards. We have the Safeguard Switch Augment. This allows you to also make your allies invulnerable. Mostly just ends up being used selfishly for Loki. If you switch with an enemy, you get that speed boost and you get invulnerability, but it's half of the duration that is listed on the ability. So this being 16 seconds sounds really nice, but that is the full duration. And if you switch teleport with an enemy, you get 8 seconds of invulnerability. I'm saying that as if that's a bad thing. It's not at all. It's just worth noting. If you think you're getting 16 seconds of invulnerability, you can only give that to allies. It also means that Loki is really good if you're doing defense missions where you have a human defense target, or if you're doing rescue missions. You can just constantly switch teleport with whatever you're defending or rescuing. The speed boost will get applied to them as well, so you can also apply invulnerability and a speed boost to your allies, which is pretty fun. Prime Flow, since we're gonna want a decent amount of energy to hold onto for all these expensive abilities that we're spamming. Expensive-ish. I mean, we have 2 that are costing 77 apiece, and then switch teleport's not too bad. And we're really not using decoy, but it's there if you want to drop down a decoy somewhere and use switch teleport on it. It's useful for spy missions. So, this is a pretty straightforward build. The only things that are not required are the Vigilante mods. I just decided to do these because it gives you that extra crit chance on primary weapons, or the chance for enhanced critical hits on primary weapons. That's a totally different thing. I should know what I'm talking about by now. And then as far as the other arcane goes, having multi-efficiency, again, like we were talking about, having super high duration for Safeguard Switch is really nice. If you're going to, say, drop the Vigilante mods to throw on Equilibrium and maybe go for PSF on the Exilus, if you feel like you want to have that on there, you could always throw on any sort of primary or secondary weapon boosting arcane that you want to get yourself more damage instead of relying on Vigilante mods. Not that you even really need that, since we're already armor stripping and shield stripping enemies. You're going to be taking them out pretty damn easily. So enhancing your weapons further probably isn't even a necessary thing, but again, that's the nice thing about how this is all set up. When you're invulnerable and invisible, and you can just rip away your enemy's defenses as soon as you want, clear out an entire room, the mod selection that you have doesn't matter all that much. Seeing as how this is as effective as it is, and I promise you it is, you'll see very soon, I opted to select some weapons to use that are, shall we say, not top tier. Not bad weapons. Stella, Piranha, Prismasgana, they're fine weapons. They're definitely not, the top tier weapons that you would think to bring into Steel Path to kill lots of enemies, but that's exactly what I'm going to do. We're going to take Loki out for a spin. We're going to wreck some enemies in Steel Path, no problem. I think I will just go with a companion that's not going to get in the way, just to prove a point. Now, fair warning here, this might not be super duper interesting. This isn't exactly a super crazy build. It's going to have lots of big numbers up all over the place. It's not action-packed, since most enemies are going to be just completely oblivious to our presence in the first place. It's going to be a lot of armor-stripping, completely oblivious enemies who are standing right in front of us and then shooting them in the face. So obviously, since we're going to be invisible most of the time, you don't have to be constantly spamming Safeguard Switch. But it's there for when shit hits the fan. I'm sure we all know by now that armor stripping is an incredibly potent tool to have. So, as soon as you can get armor stripping on a good Warframe, grab something that's just packed full of slash damage like the Astilla, you're going to rip through enemies, no problem. So since you can't refresh invisibility while it's active, you do have the option to utilize Safeguard Switch right before it expires to give yourself a nice cushy window to reactivate invisibility. Not that it's a particularly big deal, because enemies will stop shooting as soon as you're no longer invisible, so it's more of just, if you get hit with something unforeseen, you have Safeguard Switch there to help you get out of sticky situations. Probably one of the best places to use it is against Acolytes. When they pop up, you can use a Switch Teleport with a nearby enemy, and then you have 8 seconds of invulnerability or more if you're using Multificiency to kill that Acolyte, which really isn't a hard thing to do. Let's switch over to the Piranha now that we got a bunch of guys armor stripped. Again, Piranha is definitely not an optimal sidearm to be using for killing armored Steel Path Grineer, but then again, we're taking away their armor. They don't deserve armor. They're not allowed to have armor because I said so, and now my slash damage pack Piranha is just going to tear them apart. Doing stuff like this is really fun because it means that your weapon selection is not necessarily limited to what we would consider to be, top tier, A-rank, super powerful weapons that you might normally consider using for Steel Path. And again, I'm not even trying to trash these weapons as if they're bad or something. There are occasional enemies popping up that are from other rooms that are not armor stripped, and it's dealing with them just fine. So it's not that these are bad guns, it's just when you have to deal with armor, they're not necessarily everybody's first choice for killing lots of enemies. And now why don't we throw the Prismasgana into the mix just for fun. Weapon that really doesn't want to be here, but we're going to do it anyways. Don't even have a kill yet with this thing, jeez. This is probably a better example of a bad weapon to bring to Steel Path, but hey, when you got armor stripping on your side, and when your enemies can't fight back because they can't see you and they don't want to shoot blindly at each other, then, well, you can just do this to them. So I'm sure you can imagine, since we're doing this, if you were to actually grab any of your top tier guns, grab a Latron, a Torrid, a Strun, a Lex Prime, grab whatever guns you want that are known for tearing enemies up nice and easy. get rid of all their armor, make it so the enemies can't fight back against you, and you are just going to absolutely decimate anything that dares to get in your way. And if you notice, we haven't been spending too much energy because, although we do have to keep using pillage, it hits so many enemies in such a large area that we don't have to be spamming it constantly like you would have to do with, say, Terrify. So, although we are using two abilities that cost 77 energy apiece, throwing in Arcane Energize makes it pretty easy to keep your energy up at all times. And then you're always ready to activate Switch Teleport at a moment's notice if things get hairy for any reason. Obviously, if you're using this in a group, you're going to have to be more wary of Eximus enemies throwing out auras that are going to hit you and deal damage, so you have the ability to utilize Safeguard Switch to protect against those. And Safeguard Switch does cleanse status effects, negative status effects specifically, so if you use this in a squad, you can use it to get rid of status effects on yourself if an Eximus decides to hit you with something, or if one of your allies is hit by an Eximus or has got some slash or toxin on them, you can switch with them to, of course, make them invincible, but also to get rid of those status effects. Just makes it super easy to keep your allies alive. Makes Loki kind of a support and an attack Warframe. I'm just going to quickly use Safeguard Switch before the Acolyte pops up. Do it again, since I don't have my abilities taken away from me. He decided he's going to be a little bitch and put Magnetize on me. I'm just have to wait for that to go away. But see, even the Acolytes are affected by invisibility, so I don't actually have to worry about this too much since I can just make myself invincible. There we go. Of course, you are still vulnerable to Acolyte's abilities with something like this, but it doesn't really matter too much for the most part. Even if you have abilities deactivated, you can still utilize Safeguard Switch, because once the invulnerability is applied to you, that part can't be taken away. It's not tied directly to the ability duration like when you have something like Rhino's Iron Skin. It's not directly tied to the ability. The invulnerability is just applied to you, so you can just utilize that, which is really nice. You can also utilize Safeguard Switch, or Switch Teleport in general, on enemies with Overguard. So you don't have to worry about taking them down first. You can just Switch Teleport with any enemy that is near you to gain that invulnerability. Only now we're finally getting to showcase a little bit of the speed bonus that we get from Switch Teleport. It's just kind of hard to show off in a small room, but I wanted to focus more on shredding enemies up than moving super fast. But there you go. You can move really fast with Switch Teleport. Makes it very easy to do rescue missions. Makes it easy to blitz all sorts of stuff. As soon as you grab a really powerful weapon to take out enemies with quickly. I mean, Loki is just dominant in Steel Path.
So you conquer yourself.
There's really no need to use Radial Disarm on Loki anymore, which is part of why I think Loki could use a little bit of love, a little bit of an update to change some things around. But the fact that you can use Switch Teleport to make yourself and allies invulnerable, grant a speed boost, make yourself completely invisible, and have enemies just ignore you because they don't know how to deal with invisibility, and then slap on Pillage to get rid of armor so you can just shred through enemies effortlessly with almost any weapon of your choosing. I mean, it's kind of hard to find a downside with Loki here. I guess maybe normal defense missions would be a bit of a pain with Loki, but hey, not every Warframe is perfect. And for as old as Loki is, and technically dated his design is for how many years it's been around, you can still make Loki a pretty awesome powerhouse in Steel Path.